Hello and welcome to Different Perspectives. I am Paul Ndiho. Zambia is mourning the loss of its sixth president, Edgar Chagwa Lungu, who passed away at 68 while receiving treatment in South Africa. Lungu, who became the president in 2015 after Michael Sata's death, led the country through economic challenges and infrastructure growth. After losing the elections in 2021 to President Hakainde Hichilema, he was barred from making a political comeback. He was known for his warmth and charisma. On today's podcast, we dive into the legacy of a remarkable figure, President Edgar Lungu, while exploring both his achievements and controversies that shaped his story. To learn more, I'm joined by Professor Kenneth Muenda, a Rhodes Scholar and extraordinary professor of law at the University of Western Cape, as he shares his insights on the man behind the headline. Welcome to Different Perspectives.
Thank you so much, Paul, and it's an honor to be on your show.
Thank you so much for honoring this platform, and my condolences to you, sir, for losing one of your leaders in the.
Thank you so much, Paul. He was definitely a great man. He will be greatly missed by those who followed his life, his leadership, as well as personal friends and family. More so, we're mourning with the family of the late President Dr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu.
From the conversations I've had with you over the years, you like President Edgar Chagwa Lungu. You worked closely with him. He was one of your closest friends and also a patriot of Zambia. What can you share with us about his legacy?
ECL, as he was fondly known, Edgar Chagwa Lungu, those are his initials, ECL, was a very warm person. He was a people's person. His interpersonal, I don't think I know of anyone who got close to him who didn't come away feeling this person is a warm-hearted person. Just genuinely fantastic gentleman with a great sense of humor. Even when you sort of just look in his eyes, you see a lot of innocence, really pure innocence, a man who means well. Sometimes it was misunderstood by those who never even got to meet him, but they'll just pick up gossip. But when you interact with a person, you come away feeling, okay, this is a warm-hearted person, very humble, full of humility. And also, in my humble view, a very God-fearing man. Outwardly, he looked like he had a sense of humor, but you see him when he's within sort of religious circles. You can see the modesty, the humility in the man before God. And very forgiving man, I must add. Very forgiving man. There were some instances, I don't want to mention names, for example, where he did not agree with some people, like when he ascended to power as president. But he forgave those people. Some of them he appointed them and supported them into leadership roles at local government level. Even his opponents, he was not a vindictive person. He had no vengeance. He was able to accommodate even where there were wrongs against him that even threatened his own life. For example, issues like a probable motor accident which could have cost him his life. But he was able to forgive. In other countries, that doesn't happen. But this was the person he was. And I think, in all honesty, that kind-heartedness of his leadership style is what people will miss a lot. He was very accommodating. Even as a president, sometimes people will say, oh, well, he's absent, we can't feel his presence. He led from the back. ECL is not one person who sought after power. Power was given to him. He did not go campaigning for power when he came to power. No. Power was given to him based on loyalty to the former President Michael Sata, based on his ability to perform as a decent minister. Sata identified him when President Sata was out of the country. He had fallen ill. ECO was acting, and he had acted on several occasions. ECO was not a person who campaigned to be president or to undermine President Sata. No. Power came to him because the former president identified him, unlike other people who are constantly seeking power.
I was there when former President Michael Sata died, and President Edgar Lungu assumed that responsibility. I remember driving through Lusaka and even going to his residence at the time when he was the defense minister. A very, very interesting guy, and I can tell you without doubt that he was arguably one of the best leaders that Zambia has had in a long time. What made him unique? What made him different?
Zambia has had 7 presidents in its history since independence. The first founding father was President Kaunda, followed by President Chiluba, and then we had President Mwanawasa. Then after President Mwanawasa, I think we had President Rupia. I think President Rupia Banda, then President Sata, then ECL, then currently President Hakainde. So 7 presidents altogether. Of these 7 presidents, in my humble view, there are 2 who stand out, and I'll tell you why. It's ECL and President Kaunda. Single them out because of their ability to unify the country, their ability to bring the country together, irrespective of sectional or regional interests. They were above that. ECL, as you know, he is originally from the East, but grew up on the Copper Belt. So he was at a school called Mukuba Secondary School on the Copper Belt in Kitwe. And for the most part, he never even spoke his native language, maybe with his family members. But in the public, it was either English or a language which was not his native language, Pemba. It's lingua franca like Swahili. The ability to transcend and accept and accommodate and settle in another cultural setting is a very rare context, especially where you have sort of African sectarian politics, as well as you see these things even in Latin America and places like the Middle East. But he was able to transcend. He was very he operated in a cosmopolitan environment where he could deal with people from all different sectors of society, including the poor. If you see the way he interacted with the poor, the commoner, it was not acting. It was not pretense. You could see that the guy was really genuine, you know. But of course, I am awake to the fact that, some of his critics, of course, often cited the youths who were in his party, known as the cadres, who misbehaved a lot during the PF regime. I'm awake to that reality. And we cannot run away from that, as well as sometimes, the state machinery sometimes did misbehave. But Isia was a person who led from behind. He never led from the front. He led from behind. And he was very tolerant, very, very tolerant. In some societies and in certain time periods, you see high levels of intolerance, but not with ECL. He was very tolerant.
I'm glad that you brought up the issue of his leadership style. There are critics who said that he had his hands on power. He did everything humanly possible to retain that power. And I was also there when they locked up the current president, Hakainde Hichilema, as a result of them disagreeing on a couple issues, and he was locked up in maximum prison. How would you respond?
A great question, Paul. Again, I share, these are my personal views. People may choose to disagree, but I want to point out something. There were instances when, for example, the law is clearly broken. There's been an infringement to the law, endangering, for example, the safety and security of a head of state. Okay, of course, the law has to take its course. ECL operated within the law. He was a brilliant lawyer. I'll come to that. If there were instances, for example, where people were arrested or locked up, I want to believe that there was an infringement of the law. But the opposition, there was not a single opposition political leader who was stopped from flying out of the country and campaigning against his ECL's government. Anywhere in the world, they could go and come back freely under ECL. His circumstances.
But you would not say that about the current president. Him and the current president did not get along.
Well, I don't think.
I remember going to his house. And there were armored cars right in his living room. An armored car parked in his living room. They broke into his house.
Yes, that could be so. People do disagree, but I think the current president was free to leave the country at any time and come back. ECL never stopped him. I think that's a fact. We need to recognize that. And he was free to go anywhere, come to the US, anywhere whilst in opposition. ECL never stopped him. This is not particular to the current regime. We've seen it even in the past. President Kaunda was humiliated by President Chiluba, and for nothing really. I mean, the man was under house arrest. It was embarrassing, and this type of behaviors, political behaviors, they are very common in Southern Africa. You don't see them elsewhere. We tend to go after our predecessors. I just don't understand. We've seen it in Malawi. You strip the president of immunity, you want to prosecute him. We've seen it in South Africa. President Zuma, he was being pushed. It's very characteristic of the region, Southern Africa region. But these are not health politics. I would want to go back to the times of Dr. Kaunda. Of course, people say even Kaunda was authoritarian. There are people who tell you that, but there are people who try to run against the system. You see, for example, amongst Cubans, there are Cubans in Florida who tell you that Fidel Castro was a dictator, and so they left. There are people from Rwanda who say things about President Kagame, is this and that, in Congo, DRC. Even in Burkina Faso, we have this very dynamic and progressive new leader, Traore, but those who want to distract the system, they'll often say he's a dictator, so I look at the bigger picture. I don't look at the footnotes.
The last time I was in Zambia, this was when President Edgar Chagwa Lungu was still the president. I had the opportunity of crisscrossing pretty much the entire country. And I must say that from what I saw back then, he had done a lot of things on the ground when it came to infrastructure, roads, stadiums, all that stuff. He had worked on that stuff. How can he be remembered especially by Zambia?
Yes, he definitely did a lot of infrastructure development, although it came a little bit late. We were preparing for elections in 2021. So people felt that these developments were just being rushed for him to win elections. ECL lost elections not because the opposition was popular. It was a protest vote, what we call a protest vote. People were fed up with the behavior of PF cadres and some ministers as well in ECL's government who were misbehaving apparently, from public eye. They took things for granted. Again, it's ECL's nature. He was a very kind person. Others would have fired some of those ministers, but he accommodated them, he would reshuffle them, and they took advantage. Some of them took advantage of that, which cost him the elections. Others would have said if only he was more sort of in charge, more the Kaunda style, a little bit authoritarian to show his presence. But he, like I said, he often managed and ruled from the back. So I would like to remember ECL as a very kind-hearted person, a very tolerant and accommodating person. You rarely find those qualities in some leaders. Some leaders are authoritarian, others love power so much. When he lost elections in 2021, he gracefully acknowledged defeat magnanimously. People come up with rumors, and to the best of my knowledge, he did not resist. People may come up with rumors, but that's just rumors, unfounded. He handed over power to his successor who won election. And he never said, I will not recognize my successor. He never said that. Others will tell you that I will not recognize this person who has beaten me in an election and start creating chaos.
The current government of Hakainde Hichilema has tried to clean up a few things after the passing of the late the former president. They are according him a state funeral, and they're trying to clean up a few things, a few damages that they had done already. Is that enough, or is it too late?
It's a very sensitive topic because right now we're in a period of mourning. I think 7 days has been declared official mourning for the former president, Dr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu. I saw a clip where the representative of family and Dr. Lungu's daughter, I think, had issued a statement, and I've seen some of the sort of reports, that official and unofficial reports that are circulating on this issue. It's a very sensitive topic because initially I think President Lungu was denied permission to leave the country to go for medical treatment in 2002, I think, 2022 and 2023. So for the last 3 years, I think he was battling illness and he couldn't leave the country. I think he managed to sneak out of the country when there was the human rights rapporteur who was visiting Zambia. He took advantage of that situation and hurriedly bought tickets and was able to leave the country. So, of course, there will be a lot of ill feelings from well-wishers to say, how can you treat a former president like that? I think one report I saw, I cannot confirm, is that the state said they had no funds to even finance his medical treatment at some point. And he said, I'll pay for my own medical bills. But again, they couldn't grant him leave to proceed for treatment to South Africa. So it's a very sensitive thing. So that's one thing. But also we have to be mindful that he was a public servant. He was a head of state. He retired and then went back into active politics. Okay, so someone might say then the benefits were withdrawn because he went back into active politics. Be that as it may, he served as a head of state, the highest office in the land. And therefore he deserved a dignified funeral, to be accorded the rightful respect. How the family and the state will handle that, it's hard to tell. But he's a former head of state, and we want to give him a respectful send-off, which he deserves.
What made him stand out for you? Because you've interacted with him at some point. I think you even considered working for him. What made that relationship work between you and the late president?
First impressions matter a lot. First impressions do matter a lot. The moment you meet a person, how you engage and how you interact and how he welcomes you, and the respect he accords you and the respect you accord him in return, that tells you a lot. Even in an African culture, when you enter a home, the way you are received is likely to influence the way you're going to relate to those people. It's as simple as that.
Before he died, the state had put a lot of, charges. Some people call them trumped-up charges against the late president, of corruption and other things. How would you characterize that?
There were a lot of things going on. Again, I cannot preempt what is before the courts of law. We have a principal court sub judice. We don't want to go into there, so I cannot preempt that. But as you know, there were some constitutional court judges. I think 3 of them who were dropped. I think 2 of those 3 were my former students. Judge Palan Muenda was my student. Judge Mugeni Sewale was my student at University of Zambia. I taught those judges. They've been dropped from the Constitutional Court. And I think among the new ones, one of my former students, Maria Mapani, she was my student as well. She's now a Constitutional Court judge. There are a lot of issues on the judgment that was given after the judges. And there were those charges, as you've rightly pointed out, elsewhere, which were running concurrently. But I don't want to dwell into that. All I want to say is we've had this precedent in Zambia before. If you do remember very well, President Chiluba's government, the MMD government, accused President Kaunda of having messed up situations. And at one time, there was a ruling, a high court ruling, which ruled that Kaunda was stateless. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I was teaching at Warwick. I wrote in the press to say, this is a lousy judgment. How can you say Kaunda is stateless? We have the constitution which provides for when a person becomes a citizen of Zambia. But the MMD government in 1996, Kaunda wanted to come back to power. They changed the constitution to block him. That to be a presidential candidate, your parents must have been born in Zambia. Now, those type of maneuverings where you're tampering with the constitution just to preserve power and hold on to power, it's a pity. That's not a rule of law. The rule of law doesn't target individuals. And so we've had this thing of succeeding presidents going after their predecessors. When Mwanawasa came to power, he was woken up by Chiluba from sleep to say, here is the presidency, my friend. He started persecuting Chiluba. It just doesn't make sense. I know President Chiluba was very close with President Sata at one time. Much of public perception is that Sata was expectant of being given the presidency, but when he was not handed the presidency, he became bitter enemies with Chiluba and they hated Mwanawasa. Those type of petty politics. Public service, public office. That's why I like ECO. ECO never maneuvered to position himself for power. Power went to him. He was there, he waited, he was loyal to his boss or the president, and the president liked him, President Sata. Okay. Others have, you can see eagerly, the power is in their eyes.
Brought up something that I wanted to go back to. Almost all Zambia's former leaders went after their predecessor.
Unfortunately.
Why is that?
There are a few exceptions. We didn't see that with President Rupia Banda. He was a gentleman.
He was there for a short time, very short time.
He never did that. Again, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna call a spade a spade. It's the pettiness of politics. We have a lot of petty politics back home.
Any final thoughts about President Edgar Lungu and his contributions at the
We will forever miss him. A great man. Like I said, always loving. My impression of him, interacting with him, I saw nothing but love in his eyes. I felt nothing but warmth in his persona. Like I said, he was not a man of vengeance, vindictiveness, holding grudges. He often let go of these things. I've given examples where some people he differed with, he gave them opportunity. Even some of his ministers, they left his party and joined the opposition. I won't mention names, they know themselves, but they went back to PF. He still embraced them. He never held a grudge against them. What more evidence do you need about a man? We should respect the rule of law. It's very important. And we should, above all things, respect human decency.
Thank you, Professor Muenda. Professor Kenneth Muenda is a Rhodes Scholar and extraordinary professor of law at the University of Western Cape in South Africa. We want to know what you think about President Edgar Lungu's legacy. Share your comments in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to Paul Ndiho on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, and YouTube.